Before we really get started with the material, does anybody have any questions about what you read for today or about the homework assignment that's on the board? Yes?
What do you want me to do since I don't have the book?
Okay, well, if you should be able to do the homework assignment with the PDF that I sent everybody last week, right? So everybody's got chapter 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I will send, since I know that the book is, how many of you are having an issue getting the book?
I'm going and getting it today. They don't have them in the bookstore on it today.
Yeah.
They don't? You have to,
Okay.
there's a QR code on one of their little window things that you can scan and it'll take you to their online bookstore and you can order it through there and you can either order it to this bookstore or to your house.
Yeah, so we just switched our bookstore provider from kind of in-house to a corporate group last year. And the new bookstore does 3 things that send me into paroxysms of blind rage. One, they don't carry enough inventory. Because apparently it costs them money to send things back. Okay, I kind of understand that, right? But what that means is that when y'all go to try to buy a book in the bookstore, they don't have any. They also make things harder to find by arranging them alphabetically by author rather than arranging things by class. So you gotta, if you don't already have your syllabus, right, it's hard to find what it is you're supposed to pick up for each class.
So they didn't even tell me that earlier when I called asking for prices and that stuff. She didn't even tell me that she didn't have them there when I said I'll come and get them later.
Yeah, that sounds typical. The other problem I have is it's supposed to be a campus bookstore and there are barely any, there's barely any space dedicated to books.
Mm-hmm.
It's, more a campus sweatshirt store. And yeah, so, that's the end of my diatribe about the evils of modern civilization. And Chris, you wanted to say something.
Is the book from Cengage or something? I can get it off the website.
You might be able to get it off the publisher's website. Yeah, Cengage is the publisher. You might be able to get it there. You can certainly get it from bookshop.org or from Amazon.
Say from Amazon it was ranging, if you're wanting a paper copy, it's ranging from 71 to 75.
Yeah.
New, I think it was between 68 and 70.
Yeah, I think you can get it cheaper through the bookstore. And I know that they are now matching Amazon prices. But I think you can rent it from them for less money anyway. Yeah, Chris.
Are we ever going to need a hard copy of the book in class?
Yeah, we are going to be using I'm going to kind of try to limit the amount that we do that right now because people are having a hard time getting copies. But yeah, we will be using the book in class. So I'll send everybody a PDF of chapter 2 as well. Right now, I can't keep doing this because copyright law is a bitch, right? And I can get in legal trouble for sharing too much copyrighted material with you. But yeah, I think we're kind of in unusual circumstances here as well. So I also happen to know the people who wrote the book. They were my first year college English professors. And so I can probably get some kind of dispensation, right? Throw myself on the mercy of the court. Okay, so does anybody have any specific questions about the assignment or about the reading, though? Yes, Chris.
So where it says do assignment 1, is it multiple assignments, or does assignment 1 go towards a whole group of assignments? Is it just one?
Okay, assignment 1 is just the one at the end of the first chapter labeled number 1. That's the only one I want you to do. And I want you to just use the little sample of text that they have in there as your sort of piece for analysis, right? There's a paragraph in there from an article by William Deresiewicz, and just use that. Now, in terms of the scratch work that I want you to do, I'll be showing you how to do that in class today, right? The big reason for this, the reason I want to see the scratch work as well, is that I'm really much more interested in how you write and how you think as a process, right? I want to see how you're getting from point A to point B. I'm less interested in what you produce, right? What I want to see is how you got there. So the big thing that we're going to be doing in this class is really kind of like working on a kind of method of thinking that will help us to analyze just about any topic that we want to better understand. And will, I hope, also in the process help us kind of like build stronger bullshit detectors. Right, which is one of the real values of a class like this. Okay, so any other questions about the reading or about the assignment? Yes, Chris.
How is this submitted?
Remember how what I showed you on Georgia View last time?
Yeah, I just didn't know if we had to turn it in class or submit it on Georgia View.
Yep, everything is going to be submitted on Georgia View. That's how we're going to do everything. So yeah, you will never have to hand me back a piece of paper. Okay, anything else? Okay, so what I'd like to start with today is a little sort of exercise in thinking and close reading. I am going to show you a quote from an 18th century novel in which the narrator is describing an animal. And I want you to read the passage and try to muster enough evidence to make a case as for what the animal is, right? So you're going to tell me what the animal is. And if you've seen this before and you already know the answer, please keep it to yourself. But if you haven't, then the first piece of advice I have for you, right, is to slow down and try to consider all the evidence, right? We are in no hurry here. Our school system tends to reward quick answers and the kid who gets their hand up first, right? The first answer, the gut response, isn't always going to be the best one, right? So I want you to really sit and think, try to put all the pieces together, and come up with the best case you can. And if this takes us the whole period, it takes us the whole period, right? Good thinking is slow thinking. Also, if there are any words that that are unfamiliar to you, that you don't understand, right, just ask. Yes?
Is it baboon?
Okay, why do you think it's a baboon? That was very fast, by the way.
It said they had half everyone but their butt. And it's something about how they can climb trees and stuff.
Okay, it doesn't have hair. Okay, it doesn't have hair in its butt. It climbs trees, right? But is it actually hairy all over its body? Where does it have hair?
Their heads on their chests.
Their heads and their chests, right? They had beards like goats and a long ridge of hair down their backs and the four parts of their legs and feet. So they got ridges of hair, right? But they're not covered with hair, right? So yeah, like I said, just go slow, try to put everything together, right? Sometimes it's just as important to be able to eliminate a possibility as it is to come up with the right answer, right? Yes, James.
Is it a human?
What makes you think it's a human?
Brown, red, black, and yellow hair.
Okay, we've got a variety of hair colors, right? Of the sort that you don't find in a lot of animals, right? Okay, go ahead.
No tails.
No tails.
Hair on the four parts and down the back.
Okay.
Females were not as large as males.
All right.
And then disagreeable.
Okay. Disagree. Okay. Why do you find disagreeable and antipathy helpful here?
Because he's had interactions with a lot of, you know what I mean,
Okay. Well, and this is something that we're kind of going to pull out a little bit in a minute, right? But does the narrator speak as though he's familiar with these creatures, as though he has encountered them before, or as though this is something new to him?
familiar.
Okay. What makes you think that he is familiar with them? That he's not seeing these things for the first time. Yeah, go ahead.
With how elaborate his description is, but then at the end he's saying how in the end, with maybe a disagreeable animal, if it is a human, how different all humans look from each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, there seems to be greater variety in appearance here, right, than in most animal species. Yeah, Chris, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say what she's doing.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of complicate your reading there slightly, right? So if this is an animal he's familiar with, right, why doesn't he just say what it is?
So that we still wonder what it is and actually take in all the details, trying to figure out what it is. Because if we know what it is, then we're gonna know the details about it.
We're
If
gonna
he's
jump.
sitting there describing
Yeah.
all of it in that long paragraph, then it's making us think about it and think about it in some little detail.
Okay, so if the author is doing that, right, the author clearly knows what the thing is, right? And knows what it is he wants to describe. Does that necessarily mean that the narrator, who's also a character in the story, knows what the thing is? No, not necessarily, right? In fact, the fact that he doesn't name the creature, right, suggests that he probably doesn't know what it is, right? Or at least not right away.
Do you mean that as in with the the writer and the way that he's writing it with the character, necessarily the character could possibly not be human, where it's from another perspective kind of thing?
Okay, yeah, it's possible. So that's one possibility, right? That the narrator isn't human and is observing these creatures for the first time, right? Or the narrator could simply be observing human beings and not recognizing them, right? For what they are. Does he seem to like these creatures?
He seems to almost have a mixed feeling about them with the way he's explaining them, and then the way he ends in that stuff. It's almost like a mixed feeling.
Yeah, I mean, they're fascinating to him, right? He spends a good deal of time describing them. But then he says, upon the whole, I never beheld in all my travels so disagreeable an animal, or one against which I naturally conceived so strong an antipathy. Does everybody know what antipathy means?
I was just about to ask that.
Okay. And this is the, if you don't know what a word means, right, just ask, right? It's, there's no embarrassment here. Right? So antipathy comes from the Greek, right? Anti, against, and pathos, feeling. So antipathy is feeling against, right? So if you feel an antipathy towards something, it means you dislike it, right? You take an instant distaste to it. So does everybody agree that the creature here being described is a human?
No.
You do not. What do you think it is, Chris? What else do you think it could be?
I don't know, but I'm just hung up on because of where it's talking about them climbing trees as good as a squirrel, and they have
Okay.
like strong, like extended, like claws that come out at a point.
Okay.
It says that they're sharp.
Yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
back that up too?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's kind of like where I was looking at that too in
Uh-huh.
agreement with him originally, and then I thought of the fact that compared to some animals, we have more of an extended finger where ours turn into claw-like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the word.
Yeah, I mean, you ever not cut your nails for a couple of weeks?
In the way that we can just like form our hands to
Mhm.
grasp stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we have, they may not look like claws, right, to us, but we have, the prehensile fingers that can grip and can be used to climb, right?
But I had the exact same thoughts as he
Uh-huh.
did with that originally.
But he's using terms that we don't usually use to describe human body parts, right? Does anybody know, for example, what a pudenda is? Pudenda. Okay, so he talks about like the anus and the pudenda, right? We don't usually use the word anus in casual conversation, at least to describe a human body part, right? And pudenda refers to the groin, but usually to an animal's groin, right? We don't typically think of our arms, of our legs and feet as having 4 parts, right? We don't think of our hands as claws. Right? The word he uses for breasts is jugs, which is also used to describe an animal, right? So I'm just going to say, yeah, the creature being described here is a human being in a kind of wild, uncivilized state, right? So the passage is from an 18th century novel called Gulliver's Travels.
That's why I was familiar.
By Jonathan Swift. And Lemuel Gulliver, the narrator, is a ship's doctor who seems to have a remarkable capacity for getting shipwrecked on weird uncharted islands. And on this particular island, there are 2 species. The dominant species is a race of hyper-intelligent horses called Houyhnhnms. And the species that's subordinate to them is this group of naked ape-like creatures that are referred to by the Houyhnhnms as yahoos, right? So this is a description of a yahoo. Right, the first time Gulliver sees them. But what we have here also is an example of what's called dramatic irony. Does anybody know what dramatic irony is? I will take your silence to mean no.
I've heard of this.
Okay,
I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so some of you might have heard the term before, right? Okay, so dramatic irony is when the reader or the audience understands something that the characters in the story or the poem or the play do not, right? So, does Gulliver, our narrator, seem to recognize what these creatures are? We've already kind of established that he doesn't, right? And does he seem to recognize any kinship between himself and them? No, they're disgusting to him, right? The only feeling he expresses for them is antipathy. So the joke is on him, right? Because these creatures are just like him if you strip away his education and his clothes. So what we have here is a scene that's supposed to make Gulliver look stupid, right? By demonstrating that he doesn't recognize another human being when he sees one. So, the basic point that I'm trying to make here, right, is that the way we frame a description, the way we frame an argument, has a great deal to do with how it is then received, right? So what we have here is a kind of cold clinical description of an animal that is meant to make us kind of like pause and think twice, and we have to figure out, oh, it's a human being, right? And we figure it out before the narrator does. And the mistake that Gulliver is making here, right, is relying too much on his previous experience and not enough on the physical reality in front of him. Right? These don't look like the kinds of people he's used to, so he doesn't recognize them as people. And that kind of leads us to the first two big points I want to talk about today. The basis of all good writing is keen observation. Whatever it is you are examining, whatever it is you are reading, you want to go over it slowly and carefully with attention to detail, right? Because it's generally in the details that you will actually find meaning, that you will find material for interpretation. But you have to do this without prejudging your subject, right? So would you read this passage, for example, the same way if you already knew that the creature being described was a human being? No, you would not, right? Part of the point is for you to come to that realization yourself, right? So when you are encountering something new that you want to analyze or that you're being required to analyze, the first thing you want to do is suspend judgment. And this, you want to do this in two ways, right? First, you want to turn off that like-dislike reflex, right? In general, if an instructor or a boss asks you to examine something, are they going to care whether you like it or you don't? Yeah, so that's going to be irrelevant to your audience, right? Whether you like or dislike something. So what you generally need to do is find some detail or some set of details that you can find interesting enough to provide an analysis, right? Most of you are able to find enough details in that description of a creature to assemble a picture of it, right, and to make the argument that, yes, this is a human being. As we went through the passage further, we also looked at Gulliver's tone and the style of language he used. Right? So, okay, so he's talking like a scientist, right? This is kind of zoological treatise on this creature. And he's speaking in tones that suggest distaste or dislike, right? So those are all the kinds of things that we can use, those kinds of details, to build an analysis of the piece, right? The other thing that you want to avoid is assuming that the way you see the world, the way you interpret data more or less automatically, right, is the same way everyone else does, and that the way you see the world is simply kind of what we call common sense, right? So when you say something is common sense, what do we usually mean by that?
It's like a given.
Yeah, this is something everybody should know, right? And, you know, in some cases, yes, there is such a thing, right? You know, for example, everyone knows that you should not, you know, walk blindly into traffic, right? But in most cases, what we think of as common sense is actually really conditioned by our environment and our upbringing, right? We tend to absorb the unexamined opinions of the people around us. And because nobody ever questions those things, right? We just assume, oh, well, that's just the way the world is, or that's just common sense, right? Even though where we're from, our socioeconomic background, right, our ethnic or racial background might condition all of those things for us, right? So I'm going to give you an example here. So we've already established that I'm not from here, right? So I come from Northeast Pennsylvania. And Northeast Pennsylvania, at least it's a little different now, but this is what it was like when I was growing up, right? I haven't lived there since I was in my late teens, so you know, I can't really tell you about what it's like now. And, you know, anyway, it wouldn't matter for the example. So ethnically, it was predominantly Irish and Polish. In terms of religious background, mostly Catholic. The economy was kind of post-industrial, right? There had been a big mining industry there, you know, before my time. But, you know, by the time I was born in the late 70s, it had dried up, and most people were working in service jobs, right? So the mining companies had left and taken all the jobs, but they left us all the pollution, so thanks for that. Rates of gun ownership were fairly low. The only people I knew who owned guns were hunters, and they usually kept them locked up when they weren't using them. Standards of sociability are also a little bit different, right? The rudest thing you can do to a Northeasterner is waste their time. Now, if we compare this to Southwest Georgia. So, ethnically and racially, what is Southwest Georgia like? Okay, yeah. So yeah, instead of like this kind of like specific white ethnic background from, you know, like where I come from, right? It is more racially diverse here, right? In fact, the black and Latino population of Sumter County as a whole is larger than the white population of Sumter County, right? What about in terms of religion?
Protestant.
Yeah, different species of Protestant, right? You've got Baptists, you've got Methodists, you know, but yeah, Episcopalians, right? But mostly you've got different Protestant groups. What about the economy? What do people do for a living here mostly? How do people make money? What's that?
Service.
Okay, yeah, there's a big service economy, right? Big-ish. And agriculture, right? A lot of farming. Now, what about gun ownership rates?
Hi.
Yeah, lots of people here are armed. And do people typically keep their guns locked in safes when not in use?
No.
No, people will just leave leave a handgun lying out on the car seat, right? And in terms of sort of basic standards of friendliness and politeness, what's it like here typically?
I'd say pretty friendly.
Yeah, people that are friendly at least on a surface level, right? There is an expectation that you will be friendly and hospitable when you meet somebody, right? So we can see how somebody coming from this background, right, where what is common sense, what is normal is quite different, is going to have a little bit of trouble adjusting to this, right? To give you a couple of examples here, right? So not only is the religious mix where I come from different, but attitudes towards religion are also a little bit different. It's not necessarily that people are less religious, but people don't, like, it's less central to, church is less central to people's social lives, so people don't tend to talk about it as much, right? Now, when I moved down here, what do you think was the first question people asked me?
Where do you go to church?
Yeah, have you found a church home yet, right? And, they were trying to be friendly, they were trying to be welcoming, but because where I come from, it's not normal to ask that question, right? I interpreted that as invasive. It's like, it's none of your business, right? Like, back off. And because where I come from, people don't typically stop and talk to strangers, right? And because all I knew about the rural South when I moved here 9 years ago was what I'd seen in movies made by people from Hollywood or New York City, I interpreted several situations as dangerous that were not.
Like what?
Well, my first week here, right, I was out walking my dog at night, and these two guys in a pickup truck pull up next to me, and I'm just, okay, like they smell Yankee on me and they're going to shoot me, right? So they roll down the window of the truck, and I'm expecting the shotgun blast, and it's like, this is my first job out of grad school, I don't even get to start it, right? And, a guy just sticks his head out the window and says, excuse me, do you drive a Kia? Yeah. Does it get good gas mileage? I was thinking of buying one. Yeah, pretty good. Okay, thanks. And he rolled up his window and drove away, right? So, because I was scared by images in the mass media about the rural South, right? And because I come from a place where people don't generally do this, right? People don't stop a stranger on the street to ask him about buying a car.
You run the other way when people do that.
Yeah, like I was interpreting situations as invasive or threatening when they were not meant to be, right? So I know that this was kind of a lengthy little digression here, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is that for everything that we read and everything that we analyze in this class, you need to try to understand it on its own terms, not on yours, right? So instead of trying to adjust it to whatever your own pre-existing belief system is, right? You need to understand it for what it is and from where it's coming, right? Before you can do any kind of meaningful analysis with it. Now, the other thing that you want to do, another thing that will help you to suspend judgment when you're observing something, is to avoid evaluative language. Right, so descriptive language, fairly obvious, right? Language that simply gives your reader a picture of what it is you are talking about, right? That helps your reader to understand some features of what you're talking about. So if we go back to the passage from Gulliver's Travels, right? Words like thick, frizzled, claws, tails, right? There's no judgment in those words, they're just describing a thing, right? giving you a picture of a thing. Now, words like disagreeable and antipathy, on the other hand, they're not describing the thing, they're telling you how the narrator feels about something, right? So evaluative words are words that show your reader how you feel about whatever you are looking at, right? But that don't actually give your reader any information to help them understand what you're looking at. So, not that you would do this, but if you look at this desk, say, and describe it as beautiful, does that actually tell me anything useful about the desk? No, it just tells me how you perceive it, right? If it's beautiful, if it's hideous, right? Okay, fine, that's great. You either like or don't like it, but I still don't know what it looks like, right? Whereas if you tell me that the desk is brown, that someone has scratched some Greek letters into it, that there are other bits of graffiti, right? They've scratched off part of the surface, that the edges are kind of frayed, right? That it's got a metal base. That gives me a picture of what it is you're looking at, right? And that's the kind of observation that you really need to start with, right? You need to start with the descriptive and try to strip out the evaluative, at least in the early phases when you're writing, right? So here's what I would like you to do now. I'd like you to take, say, 10 minutes. And I want you to just look around the room and observe, right? Write things down. Note details of what you see in the room, right?
Without naming it?
What's that?
Without naming it?
No, you can name it. Yeah, you can name the thing that you're looking at, right? But yeah, just for now, just look around and observe details, right? As much as you can, whatever you can. And if you run out of things to observe, then maybe take something you've already seen and start to break it down a little bit. Take another 2 minutes. So what I'd like you to do now is take the observations you made and write a short paragraph in the next 5 minutes that you would be willing to share with the class that describes the room without using any evaluative terms, right? Purely descriptive, no evaluative words, right? So take 5 minutes, see if you can do that. Take 2 more minutes. Okay, that's time. So who is willing to be first to share what they wrote? Yeah, James, go ahead.
So, room 201 has a standard light switching door. There's a billboard with various announcements pinned to it. It has between 20 and 30 desks with chairs. It has 2 whiteboards, one of which has strips of unpainted wall next to it. It has a brownish floor with cables taped down on it. It has a projector screen and computer. It has multiple vents and an uneven ceiling in the top left corner.
Okay, mostly good. The one word I'm going to take issue with here is standard. And a lot of that is because standard doesn't really tell me what that looks like, right? Standard just tells me, it's like, okay, the way this is set up looks normal to me, right? But it doesn't actually tell me anything about the door or the light switch or whatever, right? But yeah, otherwise good. And right, this is hard to do, right? We're not used to thinking this way. We're not used to stripping these kinds of ideas out of our thoughts or our writing. All right, yes, Haley, go ahead.
I put, it's a simple room with 3 windows, 2 of which are shorter in length and 1 which is longer in length. The room has a tan colored door with an air return vent inside and surrounded by blue trim. Around that trim is a pale gray colored wall of blocks, and above that is the white tiles. Next to the door is a bulletin board with posters and quotes and a pencil sharpener. There are 9 people in the room, 39 desks, 1 computer station, and 38 chairs. I lost where it was. 1 blank piece of paper on the back wall, and there are 2 whiteboards, a screen projector, and a Wi-Fi router.
Okay, and similar issue here with simple, right? I don't know what's simple to you. But otherwise, yeah, like so it seems like you both kind of had a little bit of trouble doing with that first sentence and then found your stride, right? Yeah, Brandon.
I put you enter the bright wooden door, an announcement board fills your eyes as you walk in the room. The white room, empty and blank, as not to diverge your focus from the professor. The large lights are evenly dispersed across the grid ceiling. They sit symmetrically, producing an even lighting through the room. The light cascades onto the tan textile flooring, perfectly disguising the filth within.
Perfectly disguising the filth within.
I had read like an article that's why like all the flooring in schools are like tan colored because there's so much dirt on them. And they
Yeah.
can't get it all the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're not wrong. Yeah, and again, like overall, really good. And I can see already actually starting to move towards interpretation of some of the things you're looking at. But yeah, I would just take issue with perfectly there, right? And I think everybody's getting the point here now, right? The basic idea here is just like when you're starting to do your observation practice, right? For whatever it is you're trying to analyze, try to get rid of any language in what you're writing or in your thinking that might lead you to prejudge the subject, right? The whole idea is to approach it from as kind of neutral a space and objective a space as possible, right? Now, what you're going to want to do next, once you've got your objective data, right, is try to arrange it into meaningful patterns. So we're just going to kind of adopt the language the textbook uses here, and we're going to look at 3 types of patterns that we tend to make meaning out of, right? The first and the easiest to locate we call strands. And strands are built on repetition and similarity. So when we're looking at strands, we're looking at things that have something in common with each other, right? So to give you an example from our Gulliver's Travels quote, right? We noted that all of the terms for body parts, right, were mostly types, the words that you would use to describe animals rather than humans. So that would be an example of a strand that you can then use to analyze for meaning, right? The next kind of pattern you might want to look for, we call binaries. And binaries are patterns of opposition and contrast. Right? What is opposed to what? So we can think of things like what the Gulliver's Travels quote is playing on is the way we usually think of the opposition between human and animal, right? And on a more basic level, things like hot, cold, right? Light, dark, dry, wet. So you're looking for things that seem to be in opposition to each other, right? The last thing you want to look for is things that don't seem to fit any pattern, right? In fact, things that seem to actually defy being placed into a pattern. And these we call anomalies. And these you can't find until you've already located a couple of patterns, right? And anomalies can actually lead you to rethink your whole pattern-making exercise, right? What might initially seem like an anomaly might actually be the beginning of a pattern you hadn't recognized yet, right? So what I would like you to do with your observations thus far is take a few minutes and try to organize them into patterns, right? Look for things that seem to be similar to each other, right? That seem to have something in common. Look for things that seem like they might be opposites. And then think about things that seem like they just don't fit, right? And remember that some of these patterns might be in details about the objects rather than the objects themselves, right?
Are we looking for this in our reading or in our list? Or in the
Yeah,
one
just,
we wrote,
just
or-
the observations you made, what you wrote, right, and all the work that we've just done just now, right? Part of the purpose of writing about the observations is to help you start putting things together. Okay, so has anybody identified any patterns that you might want to start looking at? What have you got? Yeah, Brandon.
In mine, I kind of pointed out a specific object in one sentence, and then prior to the sentence, next sentence, I would describe it in more detail, and then transition to the next thing, the sentence after that, and continue to do that the entire time.
Okay. Okay, you're writing rather than at the room.
Oh, like hell, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm saying my directions might not have been entirely clear. Sorry. Yeah, Chris, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say the walls, how there's 4 walls, even though they each have something different.
Okay.
Maybe each wall, and you go into detail about which wall has what.
Okay. And if we break down the kind of like what's on these walls, does the location of the walls seem to matter, to be important?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's on each wall here? What have we got?
Whiteboard.
Okay, we've got a whiteboard here and a whiteboard there, right?
Yeah.
Window to
And then there's
Yep.
bulletin board.
So is there anything about the setup of the whiteboard and walls that seems weird?
that one's on the side of the class.
Yeah. What's that whiteboard doing there, right? Does this one seem particularly useful where it is?
No.
Yeah, because why not?
Everything's facing that way.
Yeah, everything's oriented
Yeah, the light.
in the room towards this one, right? So we've got, all the backlighting comes from there. We've got the projector facing this way. The desks are relatively big and clunky, and they all face this way, right? So yeah, so that does raise the question, right? What's that whiteboard doing there, right? So we've got an object in the room that seems to be of no clear use, right? So what that actually points us to is one of these anomalies, right? Something that doesn't seem to fit. And that's the kind of thing that we could then kind of focus on a little bit more intently to try to figure out, okay, what the hell is that thing doing there? Anything else that any other patterns you guys noticed?
The colors,
Okay, what about the colors?
they're like in on a certain object or something, they're all the same, like all the walls are the same color, the desks
Uh-huh.
are the same color, chairs are the same. The floors are the same, all the ceilings are the same.
Okay. And if we look, for example, at the floor, the walls, and the ceiling, they're all more or less the same color, and the desks are all a different color, right? So there is a color contrast in the room as well. There's a kind of light-dark.
I was with that gonna mention, the tiles up there, how
Okay.
they were a whole different color than the rest of the tiles.
We got this weirdness happening up here. Yeah.
Random window.
Yeah, our strange like little design flaw or whatever it might be up here, right? What about the condition of things in the room? Okay, what makes it? What strikes you as old?
Paint's chipped off the walls, the floor seems like scuffed
The
from
pencil
your
sharpener.
shoes.
Yeah, there's a pencil sharpener that in 9 years I've never seen anyone use. Yeah, the desks are scraped and old and wobbly, right? So there is also a lot in this room that suggests neglect, right? So that would be a pattern of similarity.
When we wrote the paragraph, I used
Uh-huh.
some words like old or fairly new. Like when I was talking about the lights, I said
Mhm.
they were fairly new. Would that be okay to say, or was that what you didn't want us to say?
That's kind of straddling the line a little bit there, right? What I'd like you to do, like when you think something looks old, what I'd like you to do is try to break it down and figure, okay, what details
Why
about
does
it
it look
make it
old?
look old. Exactly, yeah. The big thing that I'm trying to get you to do, at least when you're first observing, is to try not to think in shorthand right? You can work your way up to more efficient descriptions after you've done that initial work of breaking things down, right? But part of the idea here is to get you to look at all the pieces and how they fit together before coming to any conclusions about them, right? So pretty much anything that you're looking at has two basic kinds of meaning, right? We call explicit and implicit meaning. Right, so explicit is the surface level meaning, right? What the piece, the room, whatever, just kind of comes out and says, right? What's implicit is it's not hidden meaning, but it's meaning that has to be drawn out, right? And what we're generally looking for in anything that we're reading in this class is this implicit meaning, right? You're looking at any text that we read or any object that we're examining, and you're looking for kind of like the things it's saying under its breath, or the things it suggests rather than says outright, right? And that's what all of this is geared towards, right? So, for example, some of these strands that we're noting, right, some of these patterns that we're noting, if we're looking at, say, like the condition of the room, right, what's implied, with the old and wobbly desks, the pencil sharpener, that sort of thing, is perhaps something about the way this department ranks in terms of administration priorities, right? Mm-hmm. That the administration doesn't prioritize this department or this building. Because we could use a damn upgrade, but that's neither here nor there. Forget I said that, but don't. But yeah, the big thing that you're going to be doing with this assignment, right, is looking for things that are implied, or some specific thing that's implied in the little sample of text that you're going to be reading. And this is the process you're going to use to try to get there. So does anybody have any questions about this? Everybody more or less clear on what you have to do? And I do want to say, too, that if you do have questions about the assignment as you're trying to do it, right, please ask me, right? I am happy to try to help you. Shoot me an email, come to office hours, whatever, right, and I will give you whatever help you need.
We'll email you through Radar,
right? Email me from your Radar account to my gsw.edu account.
Not off of whatever the app is.
Yeah, do not email me via Georgia View because I just won't see it. Yep. All right, so that is it for today. I'll see you on Thursday.